The year is 1346, and all hell is breaking loose in the great city of Constantinople. People are dying by the thousands each day from a mysterious illness that seems to come out of nowhere. Those who survive are terrified, so bad that the living start abandoning the city in droves. But it's not over yet, because what happens in Constantinople doesn't stay in Constantinople. This plague will eventually find its way to the rest of Europe, where it will go on to claim millions of lives and alter the course of history forever. So let's talk about how it got there. Now, despite what some may have you believe, this deadly plague didn't just magically appear out of thin air. It had a long journey across Asia and the Middle East, and while pinpointing exactly where and how it started is difficult, historians generally agree that the outbreak began in China. What's not up for debate, however, is that once it did begin, it was deadlier than the Black Death that hit Europe in the 17th century. In fact, it would kill even more people than COVID-19 has worldwide. Historians think that this epidemic began around 1331 in the region of Central Asia. It's known as the Kipchak Steppe. If you don't know much about geography, basically imagine a big grassy plain between the Caspian and the Aral Seas. Back in 1331, the area was home to many nomadic Mongol tribes, but they weren't the only ones living there. A lot of Chinese people had also migrated to the area, and soon enough, they started noticing something strange going on. People were getting sick with a strange fever, and many of them were dying from it. And because they couldn't figure out what was causing it, they blamed ghosts. That's right. For quite a while, this plague was known in China as the ghost sickness. But as time went on, doctors started to realize that there had to be a natural cause for this unnatural sickness. And when they examined the bodies of the dead, they found one very good clue: their lymph nodes. Usually when someone dies, their lymph nodes aren't particularly interesting, but these ones were massive, were swollen and hard, and they were filled with pus. At first, doctors were stumped, but then someone figured it out. This disease was being spread by fleas that lived on rats, and the rats were carrying something called Yersinia pestis, aka the plague bacillus. Now, I know I probably lost half of you there, but here's what you need to know. These rats were carrying bacteria that caused painful swellings in the lymph nodes, which we now call buboes. And those buboes would either get better or kill you. If you thought that sounded awful, just wait until I tell you about the pneumonic plague, which could also kill you without ever giving you any buboes at all. See, sometimes the plague would attack your lungs instead of your lymph nodes, and that meant you could die from it without ever having those telltale swellings. Either way, though, death was a very real possibility whenever you got this disease. It was unjust humans who were susceptible to it. Animals could get it too. The reason why this was such a problem is that it quickly spread across the trading networks that connected China to the rest of Asia and the Middle East. Whenever a ship arrived at a port carrying goods from China, the local population would unload it and then take those goods into their own towns and cities. But they would also bring the plague with them. Before long, entire cities were under its control. For example, the city of Kaffa was a major trading hub in Crimea, and it was perfect for ships traveling along the Black Sea route. In 1346, a Genoese trading post there was overrun by the plague, and soon enough the entire city was in chaos. Most historians estimate that 2/3 of the population died, but some say it was even worse than that. To make matters worse, the survivors panicked and did what anyone would do in that situation. They blamed the Christians in the city and attacked them. Then they abandoned the city and sailed away. But before they left, they made sure to infect other ships, meaning the plague was now in the water. And speaking of water, you should know that there was another plague traveling along it too. This one started in the coastal town of Cas, China, in 1346. Although historians aren't entirely sure when it started there, either way it spread fast and killed lots of people. Then came a typhoon, which drove many survivors to flee inland. But as they moved, the plague followed them. So wherever they went, it went too. Eventually, it reached Lake Papus near the Korean peninsula and started killing people there. By 1348, it had traveled to Vietnam, India, Iran, and Mesopotamia. And in 1347, it took down Baghdad. By this point, it was obvious that there was no escaping it. Entire regions of Asia were being decimated by this plague, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Some tried to fight back, like the Chinese, who used their knowledge of traditional medicine to try and treat those who were sick, but for the most part, everyone was at the mercy of the plague. Then came October of 1347, when a fleet of Genoese trading ships arrived in Sicily, carrying something special: plague. You see, the crews of these ships had unknowingly picked up infected rats in Kaffa. And because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with them, they just kept sailing. Many of the sailors had become ill during the voyage. But once they docked in Sicily, it didn't take long for the plague to spread to the locals. And within months, it was obvious that Europe was in trouble. Authorities knew they had a serious issue on their hands, so they tried to contain the outbreak. But unlike today, their methods weren't always the best. Instead of quarantining those who were sick, they decided to flagellate themselves. That's right. For some reason, they thought that punishing themselves would appease God and stop the plague. Maybe they felt guilty about how they treated the Jews, who had been blamed for the plague in Europe since the Middle Ages. Or maybe they just really liked pain. Whatever the case may be, it didn't work. The plague kept spreading, and in the spring of 1348, things got bad. Paris was hit first, but soon enough the entire country of France was in chaos. Then the plague found its way to England, where it spent the summer killing people. But it was Italy that suffered the worst. Florence, Venice, Genoa, Milan, Naples, and Rome were all hit hard, and millions of people died. It was so bad that Pope Clement VI died of it, which is especially tragic because he was elected after his predecessor resigned, because he also had the plague. So basically the church was like, please take this job, you're hired, and then he got sick and died. That's just unfortunate. Italy was devastated, but it wasn't over yet, because there was still one more place the plague had to go: Germany.
Ow.
This is a bit confusing, but the plague actually hit Germany twice. The first time was in the summer of 1348, when it arrived via Italian merchants. But for some reason, it wasn't very deadly. Most people recovered from it, and life went on as normal. But then in 1349, it hit again. This time it was much more deadly, but historians aren't entirely sure why. Maybe the second strain was more vicious, or maybe the population had become less immune to it. Either way, the death toll was staggering. Millions of people died, perhaps even tens of millions. This outbreak was so severe that it's given the period it occurred in a name, the Black Death, and that name stuck, even though it technically happened in the Middle Ages. Either way, once it hit Germany, it was clear that Europe was done for. Cities were being wiped off the map, and the countryside wasn't safe either. Villages were abandoned as people fled the plague, leaving behind piles of corpses. The survivors were heartbroken and terrified. But they were also hungry, because the plague had killed off so many people that food production dropped dramatically and starvation became a real problem. It was a horrible time to be alive, but the plague eventually ran out of people to kill, and it started to fade away. By 1350, it was mostly gone from Europe, although it would come back later. But while it was gone, people started to wonder what the hell had just happened to them. Well, that's a video for another time. The important thing to remember here is that this plague didn't just affect Europe. In fact, it affected the entire world. The only places it didn't hit were Australia and the Americas, because no one had discovered them yet. So the people there got to chill for a while longer. If you want to learn more about that, check out this video. And if you want to help us grow, then subscribe.